Welcome to the latest episode of KapVista Klips. Today we're here with Tim Bennett from Earth Returns. How are you?
Brilliant, Daniel. Good to see you. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's great to chat. Now, I want to get into your story, what you're doing, how you are potentially changing the landscape. But first, let's get into you. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell us about you, who you are, how you got to this point, your background, what makes you you.
Okay, well, all the grey hairs tell a story. I've been about 45 years building businesses. Technically, I'm an agricultural scientist by training. So I was focused on sustainable farming systems, ecological land management. But where I'm a bit different to most agricultural science people is that about 30 years ago, I started getting in the financial services sector. I've held financial services licenses. I started and listed a company on London Stock Exchange, a UK company, ran that as the CEO for 5 years. So I've dealt with institutional investors. I've dealt with compliance and reporting. I've dealt with what happens in a crisis. You know, we had Lehman Brothers directly invested in our company, which was great in 2007. Less exciting from 2008 to 2010. So I've seen a few things. I've ridden the roller coaster a bit, but one of the pertinent things here is way back in 1999, I was one of the first people that thought about carbon credits, and I patented a system for trading them. But I've seen through my whole career, people are doing important ecological and social improvement work, but we didn't have a way to capture its value. It was just, if they were selling anything at all, they were selling for a commodity price, which stripped it of all context. So the improvement element was given away for free. We were kind of using the wrong words. We were talking about sustainability, which means holding the line, sometimes by the skin of your teeth. We're talking about regeneration, which means making something back to how it used to be. Actually, what these people that I was working with were doing was improving by actually measurably making life better than it was before. And there's no commercial language for that, no vehicle for that. And I figured, well, that's really my life's work, is working in that field. And so I founded Earth Returns in January 2017 to build that commercial layer. And here we are, $6 million in, a team. We've done a huge amount of asset assessment over Australia, more than $1 billion worth of assets here, working in several countries, signal flags for many more. So it's really at the time now we're kind of getting that really quick commercial ramp up, and that's why it's a perfect time to chat to you.
Perfect. So let's simplify it. How would you explain this to a 14-year-old that you're trying to come across, and what is the changing moment? Like, explain it to me, like, because I want to understand at its simplicity what it does.
Yep. Okay. So in its most simple terms, we are creating a system that makes caring for life profitable. Until now, caring for life had been, thanks very much for coming, pat on the shoulder, funded by philanthropy, occasionally funded by government grants. But there was, even in charitable things, there was no going back to say, this is the value that was created from that donation. This is the value that was created from that fund. Apart from anecdotally to support more advertising, it was really about, well, this is creating assets that we actually need for life. We need clean air. We need clean water. We need viable living soil. We need food. We need all of those things. And it's kind of odd to me that our economic system had a process for valuing what we extract and calling that profit, but we didn't have a process for recognizing that a profit could be and probably should be earned from looking after life and sustaining ourselves and our environment and our communities, and where we get our food and water from. We kind of topically, we're seeing a bit of that now when we're constrained by fuel supplies and different things. So, I had to build this industry. I didn't sort of fall into it. It's a really new approach, but I think the key here is, what is it like? What's the comparison like? And there's not really a thing like it's kind of Facebook for dogs. It's much more like and I'm not saying we're any of these companies yet, but it's a little bit like the early days when we were all starting to become aware of this weird new thing called the internet, or this weird new thing called Windows. None of us knew how much difference that would make to our lives when it began. But it's become just part of our natural language and lexicon. We use words like Google and Word documents and things just as part of our natural language now. So the impact that those technologies and systems have had on our life has been significant. We're different in the sense that when we invest in things, the money goes back to the people that are doing the improvement, not to a small number of shareholders. The point about having what we're doing now in a venture fund is being able to start up to 30 of these small companies, get them going, get them working. They've already got terrific grounding. They've already got the assets made and the people there are doing the work. So there's just this moment of recognition that we need to have a new layer in our economy. And that's what we are working towards. That's what we're building. And we've built it successfully so far. We've sold about $1 million worth of assets in 2 pilot rounds, but our scope is pretty large. And the only way into it for regular investors is through our venture fund. There's no institutional pathway unless you're actually being an improver, making improvements to life. There's no other way in.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah.
I hope
Okay.
that gives you a picture. I know it's a little unusual, but it gives you a picture, I hope.
Yeah. No, it does. Now, for an investor, walk me through the why. Why should they
Mm-hmm.
care?
Well, there's a few whys. I mean, there's a lot of investors who are investing particularly for social impact, and there are a lot of investors who invest specifically for profit. But I don't see why they need to be different. If
Mm.
doing good and making good impact is also very profitable, it's much more likely to be expanded upon. More investment will flow, more money will be attracted to it if it's a positive outcome profitably and ecologically and socially. And it lets us all sleep at night, and it lets us know that we're actually doing something worthwhile. The pressure that's coming on to institutions, especially pension funds, superannuation funds, from their investors who are saying, "Well, what are you doing with my money? How are you investing my money?" And they don't really have a very good answer in a lot of cases. And we're trying to create that opportunity where we're creating investable things from a micro scale, which might be a farmer to farmer level arrangement, right up to a transnational solutions for things that haven't been able to be solved. In 40 years, we've had issues with clean air in Asia that haven't been able to be solved because of transnational boundaries. And we have solutions for things like that using a completely different architecture that's completely commercial and continues on, and it doesn't need to end because it's profitable. So these are the things, is that it differentiates from grants and it packages the value of life. So that's, I think, where
Yeah.
we're coming from. And that's why investors have a really interesting opportunity here. There's nothing like this in the market that we have seen. This is very different than, offsets, carbon or biodiversity offsets, where +1 -1 equals 0. What we're doing is finding real whole ones and adding them together to make 3. Synergy is the
Yeah.
way nature works. And so, by creating positive outcomes and synergies, we are in a much, much better position to create really profitable, long-standing, solid ventures. And that's a great opportunity for investors.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing that most people may or may not realize is that every major corporation on the planet will have an ESG guideline, right?
Yep.
But it's just check boxes. They're not
Yep.
really impacting. They're not really getting any metrics or anything. It's just check boxes. Now, their shareholders are pushing for it. The community around them are pushing for it, but they don't know how to solve it. So this is something to actually solve it and see real returns.
Solve it and more. The other problem that ESG reports have is that recent statistics I've read said that about 87% of investors in those companies don't believe the reports they're reading. They don't believe they're
Yeah,
actually true. So this issue of
yeah,
greenwashing is a real problem. It's great to be able to say to your shareholders, here's a lovely story that we've made. Here's a beautiful ESG picture. Aren't we good folks? Keep buying our shares. I don't mean to be cynical about that, but what our system does is to say, here are the verifiable data sets, and here's the investment that this company has made into making sure that that improvement continues to propagate, continues to grow. and their investment makes that information replicable. So what works in Western Australia on a dry land farm that's getting hotter and drier might also work in about 75% of African farms that feed about, around the world, about 45% of farming land is very similar to our dry land farming systems in Western Australia. So it's more than one story. We're linking one farm or one ecological system to one story. This is about the capital flowing back to make the replication possible so that many more people can adapt to climate change. And it's not limited to climate. It can be social effects. It can be, how do we adapt to AI coming into the workplace? How do we create national industries that can support growing populations? But really, here's an important point that addresses your question, I think, really carefully, Daniel, and that is that for an investment into a license, those companies don't just get an ESG report. They actually get to secure their supply chain in a changing climate because they're able to contract with producers that can prove they're adapting to changing climate. They actually get to use verified claims to support new products in the market that can be sold at premiums that actually create a profit for them in addition to their ESG report. This is not an expense for a company to pay out. This is an asset that they purchase. They can purchase shares in these, what we call Kini companies. Those sit as shares on their balance sheet. They earn dividends and income as well. So this is no longer an expense. It's an investment into a better future for themselves and for their supply chain, for the people they work with, and it's very demonstrable and verifiable to their shareholders.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about the traction that you have.
Yeah, so far we started and then COVID hit. So we mostly focused in the early days in Australia. We've assessed 45 different properties, some a multiple of times. We've verified 5.5 million hectare years of ecological improvement in Australia, which has a value of about $1.2 billion. We have also started work in Ethiopia, in India, in Thailand, and in Brunei. We've got 5 or 6 other ASEAN nations flagging interest. We've got interest from places like Madagascar. We've got places like Canada that are coming towards us. It's a matter of us scoping so we don't grow, willy-nilly. We've actually got to be quite focused and strategic about what we're doing. But so we've got quite a lot of traction. Our issue really is that we need to explain this story to many venture capital firms, or because I've been in venture capital, I've been in financial analysis, I've looked at startup companies from an investor perspective and produced ratings for those companies and those investors. I was in a very good position to say, we can have a dedicated venture fund that directs capital to the things that we already know will work and are working, not just by the outcomes ecologically and socially, but we also do a verification and an assessment of the capability of the people behind them. So those two sets of numbers give a very sound investment opportunity. And that's the traction we've got. We've built something that no one else has ever done. It's taken 9 years. It's taken $6 million. It's taken a lot of thought, a lot of blood, sweat and tears. But I think it's something that we can really stand on. And I think it can be a global export from Australia to the world. I love the idea that we can introduce something that's really equitable for the world, which is a big part of our nature.
Yeah, perfect. So then how much are you raising and what's the use of funds for?
So we're establishing what's called an early stage venture capital limited partnership. That's just a fancy thing that says that Oz Industry has given us a certification to run a venture fund. The nice thing about that for investors is that the capital gains are completely tax-free. The revenue distributions are completely tax-free. And there's a 10% non-refundable tax offset for the investment made. So this is a really nice structure for investors to come into, especially for family offices, especially for self-managed super funds. Pension funds, all those organisations already get beneficial tax terms, but this makes the very best structure in the world available from an Australian jurisdiction. So that's pretty cool. To satisfy the regulations, we need to raise a minimum of $10 million from a minimum of 4 investors. No one investor can have more than 30% unless they're a bank. But ultimately, so that's our minimum. And we can have a conditional registration now while we're going through the Oz Industry process. when we've got those 4 commitments up to $10 million, we can have a full registration, and then we'll do a series of closes. And I think our maximum capacity would be $50 million. We can bring more investors in until we get to that final close. Then it's shut. It's not available to anybody else. So that's the immediate plan. In this first round is to get to that $10 million level, get us going. We'll be able to put we've got 6-7 referential opportunities in the pipeline already, well developed. We'll sort of implement some of those quite quickly. Investors can see what we're doing and commit more if they like on the same terms until we do our final close. So that's the structure of it. That's the way it will work. All of that money will be going into, about 80% will be going into the KiniCos, and the other 20% will be going into the organisations, the businesses, and the support systems we need around that to make it work. So it's very dedicated. But the interesting thing is that, if we had more time, I could go into some details about what these different companies do, but they're a very wide range. And the 6 that we've got are referential. They kind of indicate the variety or the diversity of what we can build. So this is not investors trusting one theme, ag tech or sustainability or impact. They're investing in a particular process that creates a whole new operation in the economy that isn't investable in any other way. So, in all those senses, I think we can offer investors a really interesting, safe, well-managed, tax-advantaged outcome that hopefully they'll find attractive. I certainly do, and I'm a big believer, and I'm an investor in the fund myself. I'm the first investor in it. So, we're all in there, boots and all, and with $6 million into the program and 9 years of work already, we're boots and all. We're not going away from this. There's no short term to this, and there's also no option for failure. This is resilience is the only way out kind of situation.
Yeah, amazing. I'm not going to keep up too much more of your time, but is there any final words that you want to let the investors know? Because if you're just watching this episode, yes, I understand that this is something completely different. This is not your traditional SaaS or your CPG company or anything else like that. This is different, but it is exciting. This is a whole new asset class of itself. It's a whole new industry. Well, not a new industry. It's just a new, exciting generation of an industry that's already in demand.
Yeah, and it's needed. As climate's changing, as social conditions are changing, as the nature of work is changing, we're going to need to adapt. And personally, I don't think we can depend on government grants to facilitate that adaptation quickly enough. We've got to dance faster than the change. We've got to make positive change faster than the change of decline. So we don't just stay where we are, but we actually make it better. So in closing, I'd say there's 2 thoughts to take away. What we are doing is making care for life profitable and replicable. So it doesn't just happen once, it grows from the investments that are made into this fund. The second point is that this is improvement. It's generationally beyond sustainability, and it's generationally beyond regeneration. And everything flows from that. If there's verified improvement being made by real people who have verified capability, it's a really good bet, because those people have their heart, mind, and life in it, just like most of us have had their heart, mind, and life in what we do, in what we care about. That energy will sustain and grow this, and that opportunity of sustaining and growing this is redoubled many times over by making it profitable. So it's pretty simple, really. It's just that you have to take 20 minutes to understand to make it simple. But here we are. So thanks very much. I hope that's helpful, Daniel.
Yeah, no, that's it. Thank you very much for jumping on. Anybody who's watched this episode that wants to find out more, please reach out to my team or myself, and we can connect you straight through to Tim. But thank you very much for jumping on. It's been great to chat.
Great to chat. Thanks, Daniel. Good to talk. Best of luck to all of you. Bye now.